Welcome to month 3 of Squirrelly Girl, and we're going to take a look at how to make the bias branches on our pattern pieces. You're going to end up with a piece that looks like this, and isn't that a nice firm looking piece of fabric? And the advantage of being cut on the bias is that you can curve it like this. You wouldn't be able to do that if it had been cut on the straight of your fabric. So when you cut out your bias strips, if this were your piece of fabric, instead of cutting your strips crosswise or lengthwise, you cut them on the diagonal like this at a 45-degree angle. And these strips are, I'll show you on the ruler here, these strips are 3/4 of an inch wide. So it's not very wide at all. We're working with a tiny little piece of fabric. Now, because this is cut on the bias, it's very stretchy, and I'm going to handle this very carefully. You don't want to be tugging and pulling on it because you're going to stretch it out of shape. And I'm going to spray this very quickly with some Best Press fabric starch, which is going to make it much easier to handle. I'm going to turn under just the smallest edge along the raw edge. Remember not to tug on this because this is a bias strip. And when you tug on something cut on the bias, you can pull it out of shape. And I'm just going to be turning under a skinny little edge on the raw edge of this. See how that is? And with that Best Press on it, it tends to lie down nice and flat and creates a nice, it almost like it stabilizes it so it doesn't stretch as badly. Then I will turn in, spray it again, and turn in this other edge so that the raw edge meets the previous raw edge. And press again. Now what I like to do is actually to do my entire bias strip all at once. And then I cut off sections that are the length I need. And I hold the iron on there long enough to get this Best Press dry. And then I can flip it over, give it a good press from the other side to dry that side. And see the nice bias strip we now have? And those edges are going to stay under. They're not going to be popping out because you have used the Best Press on them. And then to apply it to your fabric, you would have a line where you want it to be located, and because it's bias, you can make it curve around like this, and we're going to stitch it in place. Well, I decided that I didn't trust myself doing it the whole way without some help, and so I decided to cut a very skinny strip of our heat and bond, and I'm going to take that piece and I'm just going to press it on to the wrong side of this. So I'm going to flip it over. I'm going to press it right down the center of this little strip of bias. Then I'll peel the paper backing off. And now your bias has glue on the back of it that's going to help it stay in place. Okay, so I put it glue side down on my fabric. And the ends of your stems will have something over them so you don't have to worry about the fact that's a raw edge. Tack it down. And then you can just bend your strip to follow that line. And I press it in place just one section at a time like this, so that you can follow whatever curve is going on there. And this is just a way to kind of hold it in place to get ready for your stitching so that you can follow whatever the curve was that you wanted to follow. Now, another way that you could accomplish this curve is to lay your heat and bond over your pattern with the paper side up and trace the line of that stem. And then cut your heat and bond out so it's curving instead of a straight line. And then you lay your fabric onto the glue side and force the fabric to follow that curving strip of heat and bond. Either way, you're getting it on the back of the fabric, and now you're ready to do your stitching. So we'll come over to the sewing machine to stitch. And I'll just lower the presser foot so that I'm stitching close to that edge. I don't trust that tail. Here we go. And we'll start stitching. Now, I think I'm set on a stitch length of 2.5. And I'm just going to stitch this with a straight stitch. You can actually use a decorative stitch if you want to, but this is such a narrow piece of fabric that I don't think I want to use a decorative stitch on it. And then the other direction. There we are. And this is how you end up with the stitching along the edges.